Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're diving into essential tips and tricks to make your leveling experience in Path of Exile 2 smoother and more enjoyable. I wish I knew all these tips when I first started, so here I am to save you the trouble. Whether you are new to ARPGs or a seasoned veteran, there's something here for everyone. Let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about is using your dodge roll. You should utilize your dodge roll as much as possible. Mobility is key to survival in Path of Exile 2, and rolling can help you avoid deadly hits and reposition effectively. When you dodge roll, you get some iframes for just a moment during the roll, similar to how it works in Elden Ring and things like that allows you to avoid a lot of extra damage. It's especially crucial during boss fights and areas that are very dense with mobs. And since there's no stamina or anything like that, you can just dodge roll as much as you feel like. The next quick thing I want to talk about, which is going to sound obvious, is to just simply kite your enemies. This works for anybody, including melee, but it's for sure more effective on a ranged character. You want to make sure you're kiting enemies and utilizing all the area and space you have to your advantage. You want to make sure enemies don't box you in. You want to keep them at a distance while maximizing your damage output. You have increased movement speed when you're not attacking, so if you need to stop attacking for a moment and reposition, then do. It's worth it. It's better to do that than die. I think the only thing that'll get you killed outside of boss fights in this game is if you get surrounded and body blocked into a corner by just a big army of mobs. So be aware of this and kite and make sure you don't get yourself stuck in a corner. The third tip I want to talk about is to craft early. Craft early, craft often. I know you might want to save your materials, you might want to not waste them, but in all reality, you need to get familiar with the crafting system early on. So just use the orbs you find to upgrade your gear. Don't worry about quote unquote wasting them. They'll keep dropping, and experimenting with them will help you understand how all of it works even better, seeing it firsthand. Even if all of the orbs you get early on just go into you learning the system and plus giving you some slight upgrades on your gear, that's fine. There's no shortage of crafting orbs. Trust me, the earlier you learn, the better. The fourth tip is don't neglect your item slots, specifically the ring and amulet slots. I know early on it's a little bit harder to find a ring or an amulet unless you get really lucky. However, they do show up on vendors periodically. The vendors in town refresh their inventory every 5 minutes. So every time you're there, just swing by a vendor and just herp and check. It's probably worth spending a couple thousand to just herp and grab one, especially if you have an empty slot. These items will make a very big difference, and you'll feel a lot stronger even just having a random basic amulet compared to having an empty slot. Tip number 5. This section is going to be a little bit more complex. I'm going to have to show you exactly what I mean, but I'm talking about the fact that you have 2 sets of weapons. So on this game, you can equip 2 sets of weapons at a time. Using this feature allows you to swap between the weapons and adapt your playstyle for different scenarios. You can mix in, fire specialty or frost specialty, or if you're just testing different skill setups or something like that. And quickly, I'm going to show how this works in the passive skills menu. Okay, so we'll start by looking at the passive skills tree, and this is pretty big, insane, skills tree. I refunded a few skill points so I could explain this part a little better in visual. Otherwise, you're not going to understand it. Up here on the top right, you have your skill points, you have your weapon set 1 allocation points, and weapon set 2 allocation points. And if you hover your mouse over here, it'll show you skill points. On leveling up and upon completing certain quests, you'll gain a skill point. Each point can be allocated on the passive skill tree to gain benefit of the passive skill. You can only allocate skill points on passives that are connected to your other things. So basically it's saying you connect in a line, which is pretty obvious. However, the part that is a little bit more confusing for most people, and at least it was for me until I understood it, was the weapon set points. A number of your skill points can be used as weapon set points. Weapon set points allow a single skill point to instead be allocated to 2 different passives. You gain the benefit of these passive skills depending on which passive set you currently have active. Weapon set points cannot allocate jewel sockets or keystone passives. You can allocate skill points towards shapeshift weapon set if you have a shapeshifting skill. And I'll just quickly show that. So if I have nothing highlighted and I hover a point, then it's basically going to use one of my basic skill points to just obtain this slot. So I'm going to hit cancel, and if I highlight this weapon set 1 and then do that, that is specific for weapon set 1. And if I do weapon set 2 instead, and I do right there, see how it's orange going this way and green going this way? The green line means this is applying for weapon set 2. The orange line is applying for weapon set 1. And the brown line is just a normal skill point that applies to everything. When you're leveling early on, this might not be very useful. One example I'll give of this system being pretty useful is if you're playing a build setup with a bow and you have this point, you can have weapon set 1 come through and grab all these points right here, which affect your bows, right? And you don't need to have your bows being upgraded when you're not using a bow. So if you have a bow set up, and let's say you have a spear set up, if you have this point and this point, you can put weapon set 2 in here and then weapon set 1 over here. And as you swap back and forth between your item sets, you'll grab the different skills. So I hope that makes sense. I hope I'm explaining it well. Maybe I'm not, or like a shield defensive setup. So like if you have like, you want to be tanky suddenly, you can throw up on your shield, and now you have all these shield passives, if that makes sense. So that way you have specialized for one weapon set and then specialized for the other weapon set. Because if you look right here, you have 2 different weapon slots, right? And you can swap between these simply by pressing X, or that's the default. Whatever your keybinds are. So if you're in a fight and you real quick you swap, now your passives will swap accordingly. I hope I'm explaining that well. That took me a second to understand. Maybe I'm not very smart, but that took me a second to understand. So I figured it's worth explaining in detail for this one. This is more just a time saver, but when you're selling or disenchanting your items, you can simply control click them instead of drag and dropping them one by one across to the other menu. And I want to mention, you always want to identify your items from the hooded one before selling them. An unidentified item is worth a lot less than an identified item. So simply talking to him real quick and saying, hey, identify everything, that'll increase the value of all your items before you go and sell them. The next thing I want to say is make sure you kill all the optional bosses. Even if you have to go and get stronger and come back and grab them, make sure you come back and grab them. Kill every single optional boss. These encounters reward permanent upgrades such as skill points, weapon points, things like that. That'll make your character a lot stronger. If you're going out of your way to make sure you kill all of the bosses, not only is it really fun, you get to try new fights out, and just there's that benefit, but also it's going to make your character a lot stronger. It'll pay off a lot in the end. The next tip I want to say is kind of counterintuitive to what I just said. It's okay to skip things, but I would just say skip it, get stronger somewhere else, go do something else, go do another quest, go level up, and then come back when you're a lot stronger and kill it. Nobody cares if you had to skip around and get strong before you come back and kill the boss. You're not trying to impress anyone. Just play the game, play smart, and make progress where you can. The next tip is salvaging, disenchanting, or selling. So when it comes to loot, what I've been doing, and I think this is a good idea, I'm not the best Path of Exile player on the whole planet, but what I've been doing is I sell enough items to maintain my gold to be higher than what the vendor items are costing. In case anything shows up that I want to buy, then I could just grab it right away. Everything else I just been salvaging or disenchanting. Any higher rarity items yield higher salvage materials, so I've been prioritizing those to be disenchanted or salvaged. The last tip I'm going to say is don't be afraid to experiment with your build. You can refund your skills in your skill tree by talking to the hooded one. So try new setups, have fun. Remember, you do not need to play the most meta build. Nobody cares if you're playing optimized or not. You're not trying to compete with anybody. Just play and focus on what feels fun and what feels cool. That's my last tip for anyone that's leveling. Well, that's it for this video. Hopefully these tips help you breeze through the leveling process, and I hope you're enjoying PoE2 as much as I am. If you found this helpful or you've learned anything, be sure to like and subscribe and let me know what your favorite tip was in the comments below. Well, anyway, that's about it. See ya.